Hello guys, welcome all to the Line Go Show. I am Redline V. With me are my two co-hosts, apparently. We have a Wittgensteinian, and my question to him is why did he choose such a hard name to pronounce? And also, who is kind of, you know, sometimes there, sometimes not, is Sir Strife. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. So, Whit, about your name.
I just wanted to confuse people.
You just wanted to confuse people, you sick, evil person.
Want to make things difficult.
I see.
Sick, maniacal, evil, fucking, putrid piece of shit.
Yeah,
Yes, look at him. It's evil. And of course, that is actually the topic for today. Well, not necessarily evil, but morality in general. Let's just go on the morality aspect of things. And of course, we want to know a bunch of things. What is deemed moral? Why is there morals? And is your religion morally good or evil? And these are many topics that we're actually going to be discussing. And just to sort of break the ice, I kind of have a video I would like to play, right off the bat. But before I do, I just want to say to anybody who is watching the show, if you guys want to call in, all you have to do is contact me. It is Redline V8, no spaces, in Skype, and just send me a contact request along with a brief explanation on what question you want to ask or what you want to talk about, and I will add you into the call when we discuss this topic. And so if there are no objections, I would like to go ahead and play this clip just to break the ice. Does that sound good with everybody?
Yes.
Sounds good. All right, guys. All mute, and here it goes.
Allow for all that. You still have to credit religion with being the source of ethics and morals. Where would we get these from if it weren't for faith? I think in the time I've got, I think that's the position I most want to undermine. I don't believe that it's true that religion is moral or ethical. I certainly don't believe, of course, that any of its explanations about the origin of our species or the cosmos or its ultimate destiny are true either. In fact, I think most of these have been conclusively, utterly discredited. But I'll deal with the remaining claim. Is it moral to believe that your sins, yours and mine, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, can be forgiven by the punishment of another person? Is it ethical to believe that? I would submit that the doctrine of vicarious redemption by human sacrifice is utterly immoral. I might, if I wished, if I knew any of you, or you were my friends, or even if I didn't know you, but I just loved the idea of you, I could say, look, you're in debt. I've just made a lot of money out of a God-bashing book. I'll pay your debts for you. Maybe you'll pay me back someday, but for now I can get you out of trouble. I could say, if I really loved someone who'd been sentenced to prison, if I could find a way of saying I'd serve your sentence, I'd try and do it. I could do what Sidney Carton does in A Tale of Two Cities, if you like. I'm very unlikely to do this unless you've been incredibly sweet to me. I'll take your place on the scaffold. But I can't take away your responsibilities. I can't forgive what you did. I can't say you didn't do it. I can't make you washed clean. The name for that in primitive Middle Eastern society was scapegoating. You pile the sins of the tribe on a goat, you drive that goat into the desert to die of thirst and hunger, and you think you've taken away the sins of the tribe. A positively immoral doctrine that abolishes the concept of personal responsibility on which all ethics and all morality must depend. It has a further implication. I'm told that I have to have a share in this human sacrifice, even though it took place long before I was born. I had no say in it happening. I wasn't consulted about it. Had I been present, I would have been bound to do my best to stop the public torture and execution of an eccentric preacher. I would do the same even now. No, I'm implicated in it. I myself drove in the nails. I was present at Calvary. It confirms the original filthy sin in which I was conceived and born, the sin of Adam in Genesis. Again, this may sound a mad belief, but it is the Christian belief. Well, it's here that we find something very sinister about monotheism and about religious practice in general. It is incipiently, at least, and I think often explicitly, totalitarian. I have no say in this. I am born under a celestial dictatorship which I could not have had any hand in choosing. I don't put myself under its government. I am told that it can watch me while I sleep. I'm told that it can convict me of, here's the definition of totalitarianism, thought crime. For what I think, I may be convicted and condemned. And that if I commit a right action, it's only to evade this punishment. And if I commit a wrong action, I'm going to be caught up not just with punishment in life, but even after I'm dead. In the Old Testament, gruesome as it is, recommending as it is of genocide, racism, tribalism, slavery, the displacement and destruction of others, terrible as the Old Testament gods are, they don't promise to punish the dead. There's no talk of torturing you after the earth has closed over the Amalekites. Only till when gentle Jesus, meek and mild, makes his appearance, are those who won't accept the message told they must depart into everlasting fire. Is this morality? Is this ethics? I submit, not only is it not only does it come with the false promise of vicarious redemption, but it is the origin of the totalitarian principle which has been such a burden and shame to our species for so long. I further think that it undermines us in our most essential integrity. It dissolves our obligation to live and witness in truth. Which of us would say that we would believe something because it might cheer us up, or tell our children that something was true because it might dry their eyes? Which of us indulges in wishful thinking, who really cares about the pursuit of truth at all costs and at all hazards? Can it not be said, do you not in fact hear it said repeatedly about religion and by the religious themselves that, well, it may not be really true, the stories may be fairy tales, the history may be dubious, but it provides consolation? Can anyone hear themselves saying this or have it said of them without some kind of embarrassment, without the concession that thinking here is directly wishful? That yes, it would be nice if you could throw your sins and your responsibilities on someone else and have them dissolved, but it's not true, and it's not morally sound.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching that video. And of course, since this is all about conversation, I guess we're going to invite our first caller. And so I will go ahead and do that right now, and maybe he can tell us what he thought of the whole thing. See what happens. Hey, are you there, man?
I am. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, yeah.
So did you see the clip? What did you think of it? You know, your thoughts?
I did, yes. That was Christopher Hitchens, right?
Yes, that was.
Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of heard him kind of say those things before. And I guess I'm a little apathetic to some of it because I'm not exactly like committed to biblical inerrancy. So a lot of the things he says, you know, kind of don't matter much to me. But at the same time, I think I am still a Christian, right? So I do take the Old Testament seriously in some sense, and you know I kind of want to go, you know, piece by piece with you know the sort of worries he had, and see if they really hold true. Some of them may not. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where I'm coming from.
All right, then. Well, let me ask you this. In terms of the whole concept of the whole vicarious redemption thing, what would you say towards that? Does the Christian faith actually promote this type of ideology, you know, that you can pile your sins onto somebody else for them to die with them, you know, to put your burden off on somebody else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think someone might be able to pay your debt. I think that's supposed to be what the notion is that you know we've accumulated a type of debt, and the idea is I think that we've sinned against God, and you know if there's sort of any justice involved in the world, then this then has to be paid for, and God sort of has to. You know, if I'm sinning against God, it's going to have to be God that basically takes the hit in the end. So I think God is uniquely, you know, would be uniquely situated to, you know, be able to take our sin in that way.
Yeah, what well, here's a question, and I don't want to cut in on anyone else's time. What would you say as far as, God being able to take the hit himself? Was he ultimately the one responsible for it, so he has to take the hit himself, or is it just a notion of absolving all sorts of personal responsibility? Like, if you do something wrong, you can blame somebody else, even though they may not have been present at that time, and then they would be the ones to. Obviously, I'm speaking about Jesus in the third person, but that sort of mentality comes to mind. Is that the mentality that the Christian faith is trying to put out? That you could sin, but as long as you um, pray sincerely to Jesus and accept this gift, that you could always be forgiven, or you can always you know get out of jail free card kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I tend to believe in free will, so I mean, I don't think that I don't think God's necessarily responsible, for the things that we do, the wrong things that we do. But regarding your latter question, no, I don't think that just because we are saved that we can just continue to sin willy nilly, and I mean can in in a particular way. I mean obviously you can, like it's possible to do, but if you're asking if it's acceptable, no, because it's still wrong. It's still wrong to do.
I see. All right. So still wrong to do, but if the temptation ever came around where you did mess up and you did sin, whatever that sin might be, let's say cussing out somebody on your way to work because they cut you off. I'm not sure. But if you ever did that, there is always a type of Jesus security blanket that you could fall back on, that you can go to, which would shell that burden for you on your behalf.
Right, right. The idea is that that sin would have already been paid for, even. And there is probably one thing that would be important to add, and that's that on sort of the Christian worldview, when you become a Christian, you are regenerated. You become a new man, is how it's kind of described in the New Testament.
I
And the
see.
idea is that you have sort of a new nature, and so you're not going to be the type of person who goes around doing that type of thing. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of Christians who
Is
go out
that you?
cussing people, but I mean, people. But I mean, like, there should be a correlation between becoming Christian and becoming a better person. Is all I mean to say. In that, if you are like a genuinely bad person, then that's it's not proof, but it's at least evidence that the person in question probably isn't regenerated.
I
I
see.
would say, I would chime in. I
Go
think
ahead.
that's one of the things that really I had trouble with when I kind of became a Christian to begin with, or when I, so to speak, officially, in the church, like went up to the altar or whatever and asked for him to come into my life, and everyone had told me, oh, now you're a completely different person. And I guess it would make sense for somebody who like was really disgusted by themselves, who really needed that kind of change in their life. But I think for somebody who, like for me, I I mean I was young and I was going through kind of identity issues as adolescents will do, and I had kind of started to come into my own skin, so to speak, and I felt like I was happy with who I was, and I wasn't really willing. I mean, the idea of like giving that completely up. I mean, I guess it's one question I could ask though is like, I mean, what does it mean to give up yourself and have
It's not
like
you
some?
anymore, is it?
Well, and aren't you a creation of the divine? And so, what do you give? You're giving up that original creation, and in place of what exactly? Like
Wait,
control?
I missed it. Did I? Is that a term that you introduced, or is that something? What do you mean by give up yourself? You mean like
Well, the idea of when you accept Jesus, that you become a completely different person. I guess what does that? What do you mean? What does that really entail? Or what does that mean? Because
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's you give up a part of your identity that you now take on a whole new identity.
Yeah, I don't know. That's also a good question. So, I mean, maybe the idea is that, so Christians like to say that, the Holy Spirit will dwell in you, will make its abode in you, and so maybe it's one of these things where you quote unquote have an extra voice in your head, another type of influence, another type of pull. Um, at least that's my best first guess.
All right. Well, let me ask you this: as far as when this whole transformation process is done, is it a night and day difference? Can you really feel like, wow, I'm a different person? Wow, I didn't feel like this before. How much of you is still there? I mean, obviously it's still you, but how much of a different person are you in the sense that the church is giving you?
Yeah, that was actually something I was thinking about when you were talking about it earlier. When you was it Sir Strife that was saying it, that he didn't feel like there was a big change when he became Christian. Is
Wait,
that you,
me?
Sir
No.
Strife?
No.
Who
No.
was that?
That was
Well,
Will.
I was saying when I became a Christian. I mean, I kind of rejected because I really took it seriously, and the notion that like I actually just gave up my whole identity for and traded it in for something completely new. I mean, really affected me, and like I wasn't. I mean, perhaps it affected me more than it should have. Maybe I, was misguided in how I was thinking about it, but that's how it struck me, and I wasn't willing to kind of give up everything, the identity I had thus far constructed for myself for something completely new. I mean,
Yeah,
this,
I mean, I,
yeah.
I, I honestly don't remember a time when I wasn't a Christian, so I know it can be more radical for folks
So,
who,
wait, were you born into Christianity?
well, I mean, in the sense that you can be. I was born in a Christian,
So
household,
yeah,
and I was raised Christian.
that's a yes then.
Well, so
Yeah.
was I too, though. But didn't you ever have the? I don't know. There's probably a technical name for it, but like a point where your church asked you to come forward and like say the your piece and to ask Jesus into your heart, and then from that moment on, you were born again.
No, 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 nothing like that. I mean, obviously, I was baptized at a particular time, but I didn't think of that as my, as like, oh, that was a long time coming kind of thing. I mean, I guess there was a time when, I first, noticed that, hey, Jerusalem is like a real place, and I really started to think that, hey, this kind of, was really historical, and this kind of is really part of my reality. I think there was like an episode of that that was kind of interesting to me when I was really young. Um, but no, nothing too radical. But it's just to answer your question. I think it's going to depend on the person. I think it's going to be more radical for some people than for others, um, and that's all I.
Wait, so did you ever specifically have that event in your life where you actually, at a particular moment in time, asked Jesus to come into your life? Or was it just kind of like I've always been raised Christian, that's just kind of the label I accept, but I've never actually sat there and prayed to Jesus and asked him to enter my life and enter my heart?
I'm one of those Christians who's probably done that a few different times. Just to be sure. I always wonder, oh, was I sincere the first time? And so I kind of go through that type of thing. And I don't remember the first time I've done it. So.
All right. Well, I got a question. As far as the feeling of having, you know, Jesus in your heart and everything like that, can you describe the feeling? Like, can you describe the actual change that you experienced?
That's going to be hard too, because I don't know. No, I don't know what. I know. I do believe that some Christians have like genuine religious experiences, and I think that maybe that's what I had. I've been to a Christian camp before, and you can everybody can sort of get excited, and you can sort of be overwhelmed by a feeling, and but I mean I've had a similar type of feeling just listening to like some secular music that I really get into, and so. I don't know. Maybe the idea is that hey, the Holy Spirit caused it that other time, but not this time. But I don't know if I've had a distinct something that I would call distinct. Something that I knew was supernatural.
I mean, I'm curious. How can you ever tell? Technically?
Right.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no like way to actually say that. Oh, well, this is and this is. There's no exactly. There's no one's ever done that.
Well, it seems. I think that maybe an experience could be so radical.
Yeah, I know that, but how do you know if it's, you know, the mundane, or is it just the you know, the rare, not the, how you get it to the supernatural? How do you know it's the supernatural?
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is I think, you know, maybe if something was explosive enough, so, you know, out of this world enough, maybe that, you know, given the context, you might be able to think, hey, you know what, that, you know, that was God. That's the only way I can
Aliens? I mean, I really can't think of anything that's out of this world that would ever reach you to that conclusion.
But,
And I never was Christian.
I think he's
Yeah,
just saying that one would be much more earth-shattering in the metaphorically. Like,
something that was so completely unlike anything you've ever experienced before. I mean, I don't know if I've had anything like that, but I can see it at least being possible.
Well, yeah, it's possible. You know, I know it would be hard to describe if there was absolutely nothing to compare that feeling to. I can understand where, you know, the issues in explaining it would be, you know, there. But, you know, as far as, you know, actually having a feeling in itself, did you ever have that like any feeling whatsoever that, you know, hey, something about you was changed?
Well, to kind of recognize that feeling of change, I'd have to remember what it was like before before I was Christian. That's what I have a hard time doing. So no, I mean I know it's kind of anticlimactic, but I don't remember having anything special like that. I
Yeah,
guess.
not looking for a oh wow moment here. Just brutal honesty. Yeah, you know, just brutal honesty here. Yeah, well, if you were to look at, you know, the way people are indoctrinated, I can see how it would be, you know, hard to imagine yourself as not a believer because you've always been one. And so if you've always been one, then what are you going to reference you not being one to? So I think, you know, we got that you're genuine now. What do you think about the morality of your religion? You know, do you think it's overall positive? You know, there might be some negative. Is there some things in the Bible that you just don't agree with? You know, give us your personal take on the religion you're in.
Well, I mean, I think Christianity is true, so I'm a Christian, but I don't think Christianity. I don't think many people would say that Christianity necessarily involves like belief in biblical inerrancy. So when I think
Now
of
we're asking if
Christianity,
you think it's moral.
right? Yeah, just to get to that, because because in order to determine what's moral, I want to talk about what it is first. And so I think of Christianity as just the gospel. Really, it is the idea that God exists, that you know we're sinners, and yada yada yada. That whole line. And that being said, I don't. You know, if a religion is just a belief system, then it's going to be good if it's true. I think, as long as it's kind of like is Big Bang Theory good? And it's you know if it's true, it's good at least in the sense that it's true. And that's all I was going to say.
All right. Well,
I got a question.
go ahead.
What about? I mean, the whole idea of I don't. And again, you seem to be somewhat either moderate or liberal. I don't know which to call you, but like you seem to be more liberal, I'll say, in terms of your views of Christianity. But so, what about the idea of like the standard that we're going to be held to, which in my mind seems like an impossible standard. I mean, it's a standard God created knowing we could never fulfill. I mean, does that strike you at all as kind of bizarre? I mean, to hold us to a standard we couldn't possibly achieve, and then condemn us for being what he essentially made us to be. I mean, if he wanted us to be these perfect beings worthy of heaven, why didn't he make us as such?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you, because the whole idea is that if you create someone with free will, then you can't really guarantee that
But
kind of thing.
wait. But the free will thing, that's not the point. The thing is, though, the action, the ability of that happening was there. Even if free will was not there, I mean, you could just obey God. Okay. I mean, the tree was there, though. Why was the tree there? The whole setup.
Well, you don't. I mean, you don't have to believe in a tree. I'm just saying, as long as
No,
you
no.
believe
I'm saying, like, you know, the whole apple, the thing in the garden, and all that stuff. Like all
No,
the
but
things were, you know, stacked up against the person.
well, why even have the standard be what it is? Why not have a standard that says, if you're a generally good person, I mean, yeah, you can sin, blah, blah, blah. Why does the standard have to be so absolute? Like, you have to be sinless to enter heaven. You have to be essentially perfect. And since we're not perfect, by virtue of how he created us, then we're not going to be able to enter that kingdom of heaven that he made for us to be able to enter.
Supposedly made for us if we have to, yeah.
Well, why not have the standard a little less strict? Why is God so strict on...
God makes the rules, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that the more holy or the more just or good that God is, the more God isn't going to tolerate sin.
But God is the one who defines sin, right?
You'll have to unpack it. You mean does God says what's right and wrong?
Pretty much.
Yeah, if he defines what's right and wrong, then he sets that standard. So you can't say that, the standard is what it is because God is good. I mean, he defines whatever is good. So he could make the standard, okay, you can come into heaven with a few sins or something, because I acknowledge I created you people pretty imperfectly, It's just an acknowledgement of how imperfectly he created us, or at least how prone to sin we are.
Yeah, I don't think that's right, because I don't think, it's even possible for God to say that, raping or torturing someone is okay. That I think that God, is necessarily, a loving...
We can go into the Old Testament, you know that, right?
Well, we don't have... what's going to happen is if you try to show me something in the Old Testament that is clearly an example of evil, and as a side note, I think just from what I've read, there are a lot of misunderstandings there. But I'm not going to... All that's going to happen is I can even grant you those and say, okay, fine. That just goes to show that I have good reason to believe that whoever wrote that was just someone overzealous and ascribed something to God that really didn't happen.
But how do you know which is true and which is not?
That would take an investigation. I'd have to figure out, okay, what's the likelihood of of this being historical? Is there good historical evidence that this happened? How confident am I?
Well, the whole beginning, there's no historical evidence for the beginning. Because the beginning, Genesis, obviously if that was true, a person can't write that. I mean, a person wasn't there.
Sorry, if that was true, I don't. Can you say that again?
Like if the beginning, the Genesis.
Right.
Who would have wrote it down?
Whoever. I don't know. Why are you? I don't understand. What are you?
I'm saying, if that was an actual account, the whole sin thing coming into existence.
Mm-hmm.
Here. Let me ask a simpler question. Do you in fact believe that you have to be a Christian to enter to go to heaven? Or do you think there's some leniency?
No, I don't think. I think. I think that someone has to, at least believe in God. I think they have to know that they're a sinner, and I think they have to maybe trust in that God's going to take care of their sin, kind of thing. I think that something like that is that someone can just know that God is good and believe that that if they rely on God, and want to be, and try to be a good person, that's going to be enough. And the whole idea is as long as they believe that God will provide a means, then they don't have to know Jesus' name or anything. They can believe in Jesus indirectly through that type of belief, I think.
So is the criteria for entering heaven more dependent on what you believe or what you do as a person, your acts? Your deeds?
Can an atheist actually go in? Can atheists be accepted into heaven if they are just a good person? Not necessarily believe in Jesus or God, but if there's someone that needs help, you go to help them. You hold the door open for people. You're generally a good person. Could you be accepted into heaven?
No, because I don't think any of us are good enough to deserve heaven on our own. I think it's purely a gift.
What's the point of heaven?
You mean why did God make heaven?
No, I mean what's the point? Yeah, what's the point?
Do you mean why did God make heaven, or do you mean something else?
No, what's the point of wanting to go to heaven in the first place? I mean, supposedly all you do is just. I mean, what's the point?
You mean like why would I want to go to heaven?
Yes.
Okay. I'd be reunited with my creator, and
But
at
but
least
aren't you with him now?
no,
What do you mean? Isn't he everywhere?
not in the immediate relevant sense. No. No,
What's the
here,
difference?
let me finish. Supposedly, what happens is when you're in heaven, you're in the direct presence of God. Jesus actually has a physical body, in fact, in heaven, and the whole idea is it's going to be nothing but joy. It's just going to be a joyous occasion, a huge celebration, continuous.
I honestly don't see how that seems at all something to be joyful of, because it doesn't really sound like at all anything. It just sounds like nothing. Like there's nothing. There's no reason
No reason for what.
to do anything. Like what's the point? I'm in heaven. Okay, what is there to do? What's the point? Like there's no reason for anything.
Oh,
Supposedly that's the end. That's what God wants. He wants whoever goes with him go to heaven. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, a lot of people think that like heaven, you don't have a body or anything in heaven, but that's not actually right.
Well, it depends on who you go by, I guess.
Well, no, I mean I'm just talking about Orthodox Christianity right now, just regular
You're
Christianity.
you're Orthodox?
No, not Orthodox. By Orthodox, I just mean mainstream. Mainstream Christianity, like if you talk to like your typical theologians, if you go to any Dallas theologians or whatever.
That's still really fuzzy. 'Cause, I mean, heck, I don't even really know what you would say by mainstream Christianity, because, I mean...
Evangelical Catholic Christianity.
Some of them are annihilationists, some of them are... There's so many different views.
Well, that's fine. There's definitely variations in there, but one thing that they do have in common, I can't speak for all of the goers to these churches, because not all of them are as sophisticated as the pastors and whatnot. But at least in terms of what their denomination or whatever teaches, virtually all of them think that there is a period where we're separated from our body, but the whole idea is that we're resurrected and we're reunited with our body in the new heavens and the new earth is what it supposedly is. And I mean, you're still gonna have goings on there. You're gonna have government people are assigned
So
positions.
what's the point? I mean, like the thing is, it seems too much mundaneness. Like nothing's different.
What's the point of life right now?
Well, to survive. I mean, to do whatever you make of it.
No, that's not the point of life right now.
Why isn't it?
I mean, surely you're seeking joy right now. You're developing relationships.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're still going to be developing relationships and things in the afterlife.
But what's the point if I live forever?
I don't see why that would take away from it.
Because relationships have meaning now because life is finite. If life is infinite, relationships...
Is that why relationships have meaning?
What?
That's not why relationships have meaning.
Why not?
Because they're finite?
No, because they're precious.
No, but let me get the idea. The idea is that heaven is kind of, at least by analogy, similar to, in terms of purpose, I guess, the same as what we have here on Earth.
And that's what he
said.
said.
Kind of like a really extended version of this.
Are you asking me if it's an extended version of this? At least the good things of this.
Yeah.
What's good? What exactly is the good things?
So
the sorts of stuff. I mean, great food, great friends, great relationships, great laughs, great.
Wait. Why do we need to eat? Why would we need to eat in heaven?
Wait a minute. I think he's talking about like pleasures. Believe it or not, some people actually like the taste of some food. They deem that a pleasure. So I'm sure we would.
People like pain.
Well, we would have that in heaven. So if we go to heaven, wouldn't it be like the biggest tropical paradise, all expenses paid vacation I could ever imagine? Or what is actually heaven? In the sense of what makes it so pleasurable? Is it just being with God, or is there actually amenities like if I die and if I'm good enough, I go up to heaven and all of a sudden they says congratulations, you get a big house and a new Corvette? What would the bottom line be?
Right. Well, obviously, I mean, I'm going off of just what's written in the New Testament. So I can't answer a question as that specific, but I mean, all I know is that there's still going to be a physical world. We're still going to be embodied.
Wait,
So
wait.
I assume there's still food.
Are you talking about the? I don't think you're talking about heaven. I think you're talking about the world being destroyed and remade.
Yeah,
Aren't
that's what I haven't.
I thought we were speaking about the place where God actually is, not where Jesus is. I mean, Jesus is going to be again. I mean, not there.
I guess if you want to look at it that way, I think heaven, heaven is sort of like bait. You either act the way I want you to act and you get this, but if you don't, then you go to hell. Is this correct? Like this is sort of like baiting the finish line. You cross this finish line, you get a prize. If you don't, you go to hell. Um, I would say that, and if you think about it like that, just holding that above us, would you consider that to be moral, or would you consider that to be an immoral way of doing things?
Well, I don't think heaven is like that. Remember, I think it's just a gift. It's not something that you earn or anything close to
So
that.
there's no hell?
No, there's a hell. I think at least.
Wait, which kind of hell?
That I don't know. It could be annihilationist. It could be, some people think it's just, it's not actually, you're not actually having any like physical experiences. You're just like, just really, mentally in kind of a bad state, and you're
You're
angry and upset, and you just continue to,
Well, how about
exist in
this?
that.
Then whether or not it's nihilistic or whatever, let's just say for the sake of argument, if it was a type of hell where a person goes there and no matter for how long they're there, they're in internal, or I should say, they're there forever. They're suffering forever. Once their skin burns off, it grows back and the suffering starts all over again. Let's just say for the sake of argument that that was the real legitimate hell. Would
Mhm.
God be considered a moral God then if that was the way it worked in your opinion?
If
I'm happy
like
that you're
flesh
not
burnt
surprised.
off and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't honestly. I don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking in the context of torture. If God was the type of God that if you weren't meeting the standards he set out for you, and if you weren't meeting those standards, you would go to a place where torture would happen every day for the rest of eternity. And there's no way out of it. Think of it, the highest level of pain and misery you could possibly imagine.
Just think of Dante's Inferno.
Or you can ask the question really simply: do you think would you consider it a moral thing for God to torture people forever for something as mundane as like not believing in Him?
Yeah, not meeting
Well,
his expectation or anything like
that
that.
well, that's not why they're in hell. They're not in hell because they don't believe in God. They're in hell because of their sin. They could have received a free gift. Is the whole idea.
But wait,
they're-
it doesn't
they're
sound like a
punished for-
free gift.
Hang
No,
on,
but
hang on, hang on.
hold on.
I
Even
think it
if-
was going off topic there, but because regardless the reason of why they're in hell to begin with, I'm just talking about if it was true that God would send people to this place where they're tortured forever, would that be considered moral in your opinion? Regardless what their sin was, is there some sins that are just so unforgiving that that would be justified, and is there some sins that maybe pushing it on the verge of it being a little bit too harsh?
Right. Yeah, I wanted to answer that, and then Wittgensteinian jumped in with that other question that I had to answer, or he
Sorry.
said something that I had to correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
But regarding that question, I mean, I kind of lean towards thinking that that's not, that would be unjust. I could be wrong, but that seems like a little too intense to me. But I mean, maybe sin is just that big of a deal. Maybe
Well,
I mean, the whole idea is that God is just, and whatever's appropriate will.
Oh no. Wait. Can I go in for this? But when you say God is just, who's the one making the laws?
I think God makes laws. You mean like says what's right and wrong?
Pretty much. So if God's the one who makes the laws, then he's the one who judges the laws. He's the one that, yeah, pretty much he's the one who makes the rules and deals them out.
Yeah, that's fine. Are you saying that God could have made different laws? He could have made things
No,
easier?
I mean, yeah, technically he's the one who
Well, hold
controls
on.
all of it.
Are you saying
Well-
He couldn't have?
Yeah, right. I'm saying I think that this is kind of going back to what I said earlier. I think God has a particular nature in virtue of being God. I think God is essentially loving.
But can he
and so-
choose his nature?
No, I don't think God can choose his nature.
So how exactly is God good? I'm curious. How do you make that distinction between a good God and
God is loving, honest,
no.
kind,
But,
yada yada.
wait. There's actually biblical passages that contradict that. I heard about
Well,
God.
I addressed that a second ago.
No, with the one with God can send a delusion, which means lying, pretty much.
So look, let's pretend. I mean, first off, I'd have some, things to say about that. I'd want to, but let's say I grant you that. All that would mean is I would say, oh, cool, you found a place where some author of the Bible, wrote something that wasn't
But you
true.
could say that for when God was good, technically too. You could say, oh well, some authors of the Bible made God look good, even though he was a complete horrible person.
How do you know that I believe that God is good just because the Bible says so?
Well, how would I not know?
Well, you're assuming that that's
Well,
why I
hold on.
believe God.
No,
is
but
good.
you just said it yourself. You said he's good, but how is he good? How do you define him? How do you define him to be good? By what way? What method? Or what approach?
I've got philosophical reasons for believing in God first and foremost.
No. I know. It's not about believing in God. It's believing if he's good or bad. I'm saying. Can you make a distinction?
God is by definition good.
Not.
God doesn't exist. Okay.
When does a good God have
let me
to-
just say this up front. When I say God,
let the guy finish, please.
Go ahead.
when I say God, what I mean is an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good being who created, the world. That's what I mean.
Okay.
So if it's not all good, if the being isn't all good, then that just goes to show that God doesn't exist.
Where does good though play a role into him existing at all? That's what I don't. That's what I don't get. I never heard any argument that involves him being good. I mean that necessitates him being good.
I mean, you've got ontological arguments that say God, is supposed to be the greatest possible being.
Okay, and the greatest possible being could be indifferent, could be good or bad, could be both. Doesn't really.
I don't think that.
I mean, unless there's a deity or something that's an same thing. Which
Sorry,
makes
say that
sense.
again?
If you have something that actually is you need something to compare it to.
I do.
I mean, no, to make any sense. Can you tell what's good if you have this one
hold on.
being?
I want to bring it back to something though. You said that it's God's nature that is essentially good, and therefore he doesn't have actually any choice in what he deems as good. Would that be correct?
Or what? Right. So to be
So
good,
he can't choose what's good.
Excuse me. Yes, he can choose what's right and wrong. I think, but that's going to be within the limits of who he is. So I mean, if God, if God by nature is loving, or if God by nature is honest, then that's going to be reflected in the types of commands that he gives. So I mean, it's not like God can command us to lie. I think that would be that's not possible.
Yeah, so he in a sense, it seems to me, that seems to really actually strip him of his sovereignty. And in terms of the nature of the good, it just seems to be an attribute of God that's wholly independent of his will. Does that seem accurate to what you believe?
Right, yeah. God can't choose, to have a different nature. Like you asked that earlier, and yeah, I think that's correct. I don't think God can choose to be evil or anything like that. I think God is just essentially good.
So wait.
And so if his nature was such though that rape was good, then rape would be good?
But that didn't make sense to me. Your nature can be such that rape is good. Do you mean your nature is such that God wouldn't?
The question then becomes about his nature and how we come to call his nature good or moral, and on what basis. If you're defining his nature as simply the good, then it doesn't really seem to be saying anything to call his nature good. You're just saying his nature is his nature. Unless you have some kind of independent standard of what the good is, that is, when you said loving, compassionate, and kind, if you're defining good as those things, then it makes a lot of sense to say his nature is good.
I want to invite one more person in on this convo because they've been waiting patiently, so I'll just invite them in now and have them come on in and say what they gotta say, see what happens. Alex, you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
All right, real quick, I do have to run. I also have to go to the bathroom, TMI. But I wanted to throw in just a few things to the conversation before I leave. The first is that we do seem to be coming back to the Euthyphro dilemma, which is the classic question, is something good because God commands it, or does God command something because it is good, which seems to be a point that we are sort of skipping around. The second thing is a very key question, which is basic questions about, or basic why questions about any worldview simply cannot be answered. For example, why does the universe behave, or why is logic the way it is? I don't know. You can't justify logic with logic is the problem. Similarly, you could say, why is God's nature the way it is? Why, for example, are the wages of sin death? Why do you need a blood sacrifice to repay sin? And the answer can only be, well, that's just how the universe happens to work. That's just how God happens to exist, and it seems a very strange way to justify morality.
Well, and I think we've already kind of gone a little bit past the Euthyphro dilemma already into the kind of, the like William Lane Craig response, which is that it's his nature, and therefore you have to then the issue shifts onto God's nature, and that's what I was trying to get at with what I just said. If you wanted to address that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
So you go ahead.
Well, yeah, the question really is then, okay, why is God's nature the way it is?
Or rather, you can ask it what I had said. If you're defining good as simply God's nature, whatever that nature happens to be, then it doesn't really make much sense to me. I mean, this is one point, is to say, well, then what does it mean to even call God's nature good? If the good is just it's a synonym for God's nature, then you're just saying God's nature is God's nature. But if you have an independent definition, an independent criteria for the good, such as loving, compassionate, and kind, then it means something to say God's nature is good. It means that his nature is loving, compassionate, and kind.
Yeah, no, I don't think that like good means godlike or vice versa or whatever. I think like it's like something you could theoretically discover. You can discover that God is good because I know what good means. I mean, obviously love is good. I mean, that's...
Well, some people don't like love, apparently. Some people don't like love. So, I mean, it's technically subjective. The word good, it's good to you could be bad to someone else.
Well, I'm an objectivist about that. So I think there are facts about...
So the people that say love is bad, what about...
Finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. So look, we could have a disagreement about like what whether love is good. I'm just going to say, hey, I think you're wrong, and here are my reasons, yada yada. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Then you pick something that you think is truly good, and we'll go with that.
No, I didn't say you're wrong. I didn't call you wrong.
Okay.
I'm just saying that there's exceptions. It's not an absolute thing. It's not objective in that sense.
Well, so on my view, it is objective. So, I mean, we could get into that. But, I mean, if we're talking about the coherence of my view right now, because that's all we're really doing, I'm just going to say, look, this is coherent because I believe in objective morality. I think most people do. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, so, for example, love is something I think all of us can agree on is good. Most of us think that's a fact. And so if I want to say God is good, I can say God is loving, essentially. And that would mean God is good.
But I'm curious, though, what experiences do you have to show that this being, so to speak, is loving?
I don't have to know that through experiences.
No. But I'm saying you're saying God, in his nature, something is loving.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show me? Like, can you like point me to something that will say, oh, well, he showed is he loving?
Well, that's kind of what you were asking earlier. There's, I have philosophical reasons for thinking God is good.
I said no, but now you just said, is loving and good the same thing?
Sorry, say that again.
Because is loving.
Well, hold on. Your definition of good then is completely independent of God's nature.
Right.
So then, why do we need God's nature to know the good?
I don't think we need to know God's nature to know the good.
Okay, well, then it seems to suggest that absent a God, there would still be good. In fact, there would still be objective good.
Well, I don't know how that follows.
Well, you just said it's completely independent of God's
If there's
nature.
something above God that God can access that is good, what is objectively good, then
No.
technically we have the capability of accessing the same thing, even if he didn't exist.
Hold on, Sir Strife. 1 second. So you said, how do we know the good? But I'm not. And then you said, so look, I can think that we don't have to know God's nature or anything in order to know the good, and I can simultaneously think that God is, that goodness can still be dependent in some way on God, because those are two different issues.
Yeah, I see that. But then how is it that you know the good if not in reference to his to God's nature?
I think we can know good a few different ways. I think like we can just intuitively know, that love is good. I think we just know it.
I would say it's instinctive in a sense.
But to say that doesn't require knowing God's nature at all.
I agree.
And so if somebody had absolutely no knowledge of God or the good, they would or of God or his nature, they would still have a concept of the good.
Yes, they would.
So why do we need God to find out what's good?
Wittgensteinian. The only thing I have to say is that the only the, o- the only thing I have to say is that good can still depend on God's nature. So the fact of what's good can still depend on God's nature. So I mean, this is
I
kind
see
of
what
like
you're saying.
okay,
Yeah, I get that.
okay.
All right. Any final questions? Because we're going to take a slight break. Because me run the broadcast, I have to go run and do something for like 3 minutes, something like that. So any final questions, and then I'll give my final. So that we can move on. Wit.
I'm good for now.
All right. Stripe. Any final questions?
Good.
Nope. Nothing. All right then. Uh, did you enjoy being on our show? I mean.
Yeah, man, good stuff.
Good stuff. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you being on. If you like the show, tell other people about it. We always want to promote conversation here, and so if you want to come back on, if we have time, I'll let you back on if you want to come back. But we'll be right back. Go to the bathroom, get some to drink, some snack on, and we'll be right back. So
Sounds
yes,
good, man.
mute. Alright guys, thank you all for waiting, and got nobody else, so I'll invite this guy back in and then we'll continue on with the convo. And so let's see what we got. Alright man, you there?
Yo.
Alright, we're back. Yep, thanks all for the break. Remember, all you have to do is call Redline V8 and I will invite you into the conversation if you guys want to talk. If you guys just want to sit back and listen, then by all means enjoy. Strife, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, yeah. Were you getting onto something before we did our little break
Yeah.
thing? All right, and
I was gonna say, I mean, I would say objective morality. Like, what do you mean by objective morality? What's his name?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just mean that like in terms of good and evil, like something's good.
But do you mean like in a sense it's reliant on us or no?
Well, let him
It's
finish.
not. Yeah, just kind of what you said. No, it's something that's not dependent on us. It's good, whether or not we think it's good.
Well, when you say we, what does that group include? Only humans?
No, it includes God too. I don't think God I don't. I think God just I don't think God can think that loving isn't good.
did God
I
did God
guess
place the the feel good? All right, for God, to say that love is good, was he acting completely on his own there, or was there already this idea of love to begin with before, if we can even say before God? Or did he make all of these things the way they are because they were good, or did he just deem them to be good?
I I think that so this will get a little bit more complex, but I think there's a difference between like good and evil on the one hand and right and wrong on the other hand. So those are two different kinds of things.
Wait, I got a good question for you. You ever heard of the trolley problem?
Yeah.
You have?
Mhm.
Okay, so would it be evil to push the fat guy to stop the trolley to save 5 people?
Would it be wrong? Yeah, I think that would be wrong.
But is it evil?
I would think it's evil too, in virtue of being. Well, no, actually, I think
You're saving 5 people, you're killing one.
I mean, it can be an evil action, but the circumstances as a whole could be good.
I
What?
see. So does as far as Jesus coming in, do you think it was kind of like that same circumstance?
Oh, I don't see the relation there yet.
Because Jesus died for our sins, right? So him dying, in a sense, saved everybody, the entire population. The same way, Jesus being that fat guy that, got thrown underneath the bus, essentially, or underneath the train or whatever to save 5 people, only it's a lot more magnified.
Oh,
So,
right. So, like the people who killed Jesus, the Romans. Yeah, I mean, I think they did something wrong.
Wait, wouldn't that mean that technically the Romans were the good guys?
yeah,
Because technically
that's what
they're
I
the
was
ones...
getting at. If it seems like sin has to be a really really important part of God's plan in order for all of it to work. I mean, in order for Jesus to die to save us from sin to begin with, sin had to first be there. And so, wouldn't you say that sin was actually part of the blueprint for our existence?
Yeah, I would say that. Can I go back to the other thing real quick though?
Sure.
So yeah, so the idea is that the Romans aren't the good guys. You just like the person who pushes the fat guy over. I wouldn't necessarily call him a good guy. I think he's done something wrong. He's a murderer, and I think the Romans were murderers. But I can still say that the circumstances as a whole, where look, in the whole idea in the trolley example is you're supposed to have like this trolley coming and it's about to hit a group of guys, and you can redirect the trolley or
Well, that's one
one way.
point.
Yeah, or you can push a fat man over to stop the trolley.
That's a different...
Well, that's the trolley.
No, he's right. Go on, keep going.
I know, but there's 2 parts to it. There's
Yeah,
version.
he mentioned both. Keep going.
Yeah. So the idea is that the person who pushes the fat man over and stops the trolley, 5 men are saved as a result of his doing that. But the guy's still a criminal. He's still a murderer. He's done something wrong. But the circumstances as a whole, where one man has died and 5 have lived is better than the alternative. So it's a good circumstance. And in the same way, I wanted to say that look, the Romans were still criminals. They still did something wrong, even if the circumstance as a whole was a good thing.
Wait. But that's the thing. When you say, he becomes a murderer by pushing him and stuff, that's kind of a little bit black and white, because, the person's a murderer then, but if they save somebody, are they a murderer then? They aren't a murderer forever.
Yeah, he's a murderer. He murdered if you're a murderer once, you're always, that's just what...
That makes sense. That's kind of
Well,
a little...
there's another way I would phrase it, go into like an Armageddon type of thing. There's a meteorite heading towards Earth, and if it hits Earth, it's going to wipe out all of humanity. And you send someone to fly a ship into the, to fly a ship onto the rock with a nuke to blow the son of a bitch into a million tiny pieces. Now, the ship dies. He can't get off of the rock to get back home, before the thing explodes. So it's all up to mission control. Would you hit the red button that says blow up and kill that one guy in order to save the planet, or would you not for fear of being deemed a murderer?
I'd probably do it, to be honest, but it wouldn't change the fact that I murdered a man.
All right, it would still be considered an immoral action?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't something necessarily... I mean, Christians can have different, views about what actually, what particular kinds of actions are right and wrong and how that all works out. So not all of them are going to agree with me. But yeah, I personally think that, I would do something that would be morally wrong for me to kill a man. Even if it saved, the planet Earth. It was still a wrong action. Someone could even argue that, look, but at the same time, not pressing the button is also wrong. So, it could be wrong both ways even.
Yeah,
well, technically not pressing the button is not wrong. Technically, you're going to lead to the death of millions. It's not technically wrong. You can't really put a value on it.
It's more like this, It's like in the situations that, if God does control all things and to test us, it seems like the situation that God puts humanity in, there's almost no way to win. So how can you really expect us to not eat the forbidden fruit? Why should we be deemed, sinners to begin with and not worthy of heaven when, if you look at everything, the odds are really stacked against us in terms of not being sinners in his eyes? Do you find that to be a little bit troublesome?
No, it would only be troublesome to me if God were unjust. You're seeming to think that God kind of ought to grade on a curve. And I just want to say no, that's not right. You've actually done something wrong. You're getting, as long as the punishment fits the crime. You could try to argue, hey, the punishment doesn't fit the crime if you want, but I don't know how you'd be able to do that very easily.
Well, the punishment, fit in the crime. So in your mind, it would still be a crime to press that red button to save the planet, even though one guy, only one guy died. I say only, but relative. So, as far as punishment fitting the crime, what would the punishment for you be, at least in God's eyes? Or, you have more biblical knowledge than I do. Maybe you can tap into God's mind or what he would think and such. What would he make of it? Would he call you a sinner? Would he send you to hell for murdering that one guy while at the same time saving all of humanity?
Yeah, and remember real quick, the idea that pressing the button is wrong that has to do with my ethical theory. It's not actually part of Christianity or anything.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about if you were to apply that to Christianity.
Yeah, I'm answering that now. I just had to get that first part out of the way.
Okay.
But in that case, I think that pressing the button would be sufficient to make me criminal. Yeah.
Mm. It seems like...
Wait.
Then would you agree that you can't win either way? So either way, you would be deemed a sinner.
No, not necessarily. Because I was only saying maybe. I was saying for all I know, not pressing the button could also be wrong. Maybe there's some kind of duty that you have to press the button. And, if you have the opportunity to save someone, then you ought to save that person. There's kind of thinking, there's thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm agnostic. Honestly, I don't know.
It's more like, if I see a contradiction here, because if our morality was to come directly from God, and we don't know what would be, if we're having conflicting feelings about what to do in a said situation, wouldn't that lead to some confusion as far as what God would have deemed good or what is actually good to begin with?
Yeah, yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
I honestly just
Yes,
like
Strife?
when you say like it's against the law to kill someone. Whose law?
I think that
You mean our law or
obviously I'm
God's
going to
law?
say God's law, right? I think that God commanded us not to
Well,
murder.
but to murder or kill.
Murder.
Okay, and technically, what happens if it was killing? If the guy was your enemy?
You'd have to give me more context.
I mean, like what's the difference between killing and murdering?
Well, I mean, I don't think you're necessarily murdering people in war, for instance. I don't know. I'd have to think
Even
about
if it's
like,
civilians?
what?
Even if it's civilians?
Come on, be charitable. Yeah, I mean, yes, you can murder civilians in war.
All right. Let me see if I can ask Strife's point a little bit better than he can.
Yeah.
When it comes to murder as opposed to killing, so if I were to press the button to save all of humanity but kill the one guy, would that be killing or would that be murder in your opinion?
Ooh, yeah. See, I don't. I'm not sure. I tend to think it would be murder.
Okay, you say what would be burned. Now, if you didn't push the button, would you call that killing or would you call that murder?
That I absolutely do not know about. I mean, I might lean a little bit towards saying it. No, well, no, I don't think it would be killing or murder. It would be the alternative. The alternative would be it's neither. Like I didn't do either.
No,
I just let him die.
well, the thing is that the pendulum, it is completely. Let's say you have a lever and it can swing in either direction. And if you let go of it, it's going to swing in this direction. If you push in one direction, it's going to swing in another direction. And depending on what you do is actually going to determine who dies and who doesn't. So think of it as the ultimate Saw game. You know, if you had to choose and there was no middle ground, like, oh, you can just choose to do nothing. If you had to choose to do something, if you were in that situation, would you then consider it murder or would you consider it killing?
I if I press I'm here. I'll just pick an option that I think is coherent. I think that pressing the button would be murder, and not pressing the button wouldn't even be killing. It would just be letting him die.
Isn't letting someone die just as
Yeah, you have
immoral?
responsibility in a sense. You have the possibility to change. You have the possibility to save those 5 people.
Because think of it, nothing is stopping you from pushing the button. It's right there, right in front of you, and all you have to do is go, and the deed is done. So, in a sense, not doing something is actually doing something in itself. You're still choosing to not push that button, which will ultimately lead to the death of the entire human population.
Well, right. That's what I was arguing a second ago. That's why I said, "Ooh, this is a hard question," because it seems like you have some type of responsibility. If you have the ability to save someone and you choose not to, then isn't that kind of wrong? Remember, I agree with that, but ultimately, I'm agnostic. Maybe what happens is you can actually evaluate the circumstances as a whole, because if you choose not to press the button. Wait, so yeah, if we choose not to press the button, what happens is that the planet dies is what happens. The planet gets destroyed, right?
Mass extinction, that kind of thing.
Right. So the idea is it's pressing the button that would be, yeah. So pressing the button.
It's the lesser of 2 evils, pretty much.
Right. Well,
thought.
It's definitely the lesser of 2 evils. But I mean, we're talking about what's wrong to do. What's
one
the right
life
action?
What's 1 life versus 1 billion? Do you think anyone's that important? Honestly.
No. That's the different issue. You're confusing moral values with moral duties. We're talking about.
What do you mean duties? What do you mean?
Duties are right and wrong. Moral values are good and evil.
Well, I would say it would be my duty as a species to, if my species want to survive, to save them, in a sense.
Yeah, so I mean, on some theories, like you might be like a consequentialist, and so you might think that look, whatever is going to produce the greatest outcome is the right thing to do. But not everybody's like that.
So the needs of the many outweigh the needs of few type of thing. Is that what you're saying, Strife?
Wait, what? No, I mean, technically, you're talking more than just people. You're talking about the whole planet. So you're talking about every species on Earth.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why I was asking you. Like, what were you getting at? Were you getting at
You're
the point?
you're technically sacrificing one human to save. Well,
Yeah, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
No, but that's how species work. Though the individuals don't matter, but it's the frick, I forgot how it went.
Uh-huh. All right.
Fuck.
Let me ask you this. You know, if that is what you were getting towards, and I'll ask everybody this: if you were to look at everything as the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, would you be considered immoral in a sense, or would you still, be considered, a relatively good person?
When you say that needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, do you mean like it's more valuable that the needs of the few, or sorry, it's more valuable that the needs of the many are met than that it is that the needs of the few?
The needs
It's
of
not the it's not the needs though. It's the survival of the many.
Strife.
The survival of the
That's what it means to say that the needs are met.
Strife. My
I
turn.
don't think that's the same thing.
Now, when I say the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, what I'm saying is, and just in that example, is that it's gonna produce the most good. Because in my opinion, a good moral action would be contributing to somebody either mentally, physically, financially, that kind of thing. If you're doing good and it benefits them positively, then you're doing good. And if you do something that affects them negatively, then you would be doing bad. And the more people that you do good for, the more moral the action would be. So if you were to press the button, do the, live life as the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, you would still be doing more good than bad. So in a sense, good will outweigh the bad, which means you would be relatively good. If I was to press the red button, I have the entire population of humanity good on my side, as opposed to one bad as far as killing a guy in order to achieve that. So when looking at that, I wouldn't say it's immoral at all. I wouldn't consider it, murder or killing. Oh, I would consider it killing because you are killing the guy to do it, but I wouldn't consider it bad in a sense.
Yeah, so like in the trolley situation, you would push the fat man over to save the five.
I don't want to be picking on fat people, but yeah, I would push over the man to save the five.
Well, the reason the reason it has to be a fat man is because he has to be big enough to stop the trolley.
Okay, yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, what happens is like if you run it the other way, people will say, "Oh, it's better for me just to jump over and do it myself," and so like people just say he's a fat man to stop people from saying that.
I see.
I
Okay.
still don't see how a man could stop a trolley in any case.
Well, I'm just.
I don't know. Maybe his fat will like clog up the gears.
Oh,
Oh, come on.
oh, gross. Dude.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know who thought of it originally.
Okay, Strife. Thank you for putting that disturbing image in my mind.
It's not my fault you went over
Remind me to thank you later for that. Anyway, this is why I like the meteorite example and the button, because no one has to be fat and no fat has to get clogged in any gears for the
Yeah.
for the analogy to make sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just saying. So you take that consequentialist view, precisely because of what you said. You said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and the whole idea is that if a decision will produce better circumstances, then that's the right thing to do. That's what you ought to do.
Yeah, correct.
But,
Wait, I would... wait,
Strife, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
But a lot of people would disagree with that. So, like, you have what are called deontologists about ethics, about these decisions, and they're going to say, look, granted, if you push the fat man over, a better circumstances will be only one will die rather than five. But I still ought not push the fat man over because it would be wrong. I would be doing something morally wrong.
Do you share that view, like, completely? Do you share the view that you would not push the fat man in the same sense you would not push the button, in the same sense you would not shock the axe or whatever?
Right. It's the same thing. It's just, I mean, it's just two different types of ways of thinking about right and wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wouldn't press the button for the same reason that I wouldn't. Well, no, let me take that back. I might actually press the button. In fact, I think I would press the button, but I would know that I've still done something wrong in the process.
Yeah,
well.
the whole idea, that the reason why, this this topic is because I just want to see if it conflicts with the Ten Commandments. And so consider it like this: if either case you do, whether you push the button or whether you not push the button, you are still, in a sense, making a decision on people's lives. And no matter what you choose, someone's going to die. So if you were to go to Ten Commandments where it says thou shalt not kill, would you then be screwed because you're in that situation, or would you have a way of getting out? Is there a get out of jail free card in this scenario, or are you just completely screwed as far as the Ten Commandments concerned?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question. I would think that, I mean, you're not going to be screwed either way. I would lean towards thinking. I would think that, there is a right answer, or frankly, what might even happen, for all I know, is in situations where it's like, you're genuinely not culpable. If your conscience really pulls you in both ways, maybe it's, I wouldn't call it a get out of jail free card, but maybe it would be a situation where, look, you're not responsible for either. Both, you had to do something, and you, to the best of your abilities, didn't, pick what you thought was the best option. And I think God can understand that. I think that that seems reasonable.
I would say, though, that statement you just said would accurately describe every action almost anybody takes. I mean, everybody does the best of their abilities in their own mind. Everybody does what they think is moral.
Well, then, if that were true, then nobody would ever feel guilty.
Oh, you can regret your decisions, but at the moment that you make a decision, you do so on the basis because you think it's right. You don't purposefully do something you think is wrong.
No, I think you can do something that you think is morally wrong. You can think it's the best decision to make overall for non-moral considerations. So I can think that, look, I know that, stealing these test answers is wrong to do. But I can still genuinely believe at the same time that it's not morally right, but it's the right thing to do insofar as it's the best thing for me to do.
Well, so you're making a distinction between something being morally right and better for you.
Yeah.
So is that just self-interest?
Yep.
Well, I guess I would just say, though, that
Well, let me see if I can add a little twist to this. If you remember the video I played, with Christopher Hitchens, he says that if you do a right action, it's only to evade, internal torture. But if you do a wrong action, you're forever condemned, not just in life, but after you're dead. As far as, what you're doing, it seems like no matter what you choose, you're still screwed either way in terms of thinking that, because are we a good person? I'm personally a good, I consider myself a good person, at least. I consider myself a good person because I want to just help other people. I'm not doing it for a reward or a fear of God. I just do it because I just want to, be nice to people. I do not know. As far as, the reasons why you would be nice, is it only to evade or to please a god, or what? I would just like to go into your reasons for being moral, because this whole, what would you do in this situation is great, but I just want to shift the topic a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think my motivations are pretty much the same as yours.
Just an overall, just want to be good, not for fear of God, not for a hope of eternal bliss in a paradise somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's human, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is where I would say, if we're talking about what is in fact the case, and this is why I was a little hesitant of what to make of your statement, because, I mean, I don't want to necessarily lay out a whole argument for this, but I would in fact say, it is completely selfish. I mean, without the negative connotations that word carries, I guess I would say, okay, self-interest maybe. That that is the core principle that motivates everyone's actions, is that it's going to help you in some way.
Or
yeah. I mean, if you want to consider, if you want to create another category called whether or not you think it's moral based on some other standard, be it God or God's nature or something like that, I guess you can do that. But I think practically speaking, everybody does what they think is best for them.
Yeah.
That's not mutually, that's not to say you can't also be altruistic, though. I think the vast majority of people are altruistic precisely because it's good for them.
Yeah, but that's counterintuitive, because then you've got to say that, stealing test answers, you could come up with all sorts of scenarios, that you don't recognize that in a sense that it's wrong. Because you're trying to cut out moral rightness and wrongness, and you're trying to conflate the two so that there's really no distinction.
Well, I would argue that they are, in fact, actually, there is no distinction, but we don't have. I mean, that's why I didn't want to go down that road necessarily.
Let's say that you've done something that you felt was wrong. Surely you've done something that you felt was wrong to do before. You may have thought, excuse me, no, even at the time. So surely, I mean, if you went and you stole test answers, you should be able to know. Or let's say that you were someone was about to tattle on you, and you killed them. Out of fear for your life. You might think that that was the best for you, and you can continue thinking that was the best for you. But you can't deny that in a sense what you did was morally wrong. Even if you think at the moment you did it, and even afterwards, if you consistently believe that it's the best for you.
I actually could consistently say that, even according to my definition or my way of my own morality, because the fact that killing the person makes me terribly upset and causes me a great amount of emotional and psychological distress is not good for me. And then it comes, I guess, back to better of two evils. I would say, if the alternative would cause me more suffering, then I'd choose the one with the less suffering. But that's not to say it's still going to cause me suffering, and therefore it is wrong in that, to that degree, that it causes suffering.
So let's say that you're about to kill this person, and you already feel, oh, this is going to be, I'm not going to like this. Let's say that you could be perfectly aware of how miserable it's going to make you feel afterwards as well. So you're intimately aware of all this. Nevertheless, you make the judgment that, all things considered, your life, it's going to be better for you if you kill this person nevertheless. Okay?
Better than the alternative of not killing.
Right, okay?
Yeah.
Now, once you murder the person, even though you know it's going to be better for you overall, you can still think at that moment and forever afterwards that you've done something wrong, that you've done something morally wrong, and simultaneously believe that you made the right choice.
I would say... Oh, fuck.
Well, if the question is, if you're talking about me in particular, or someone with my kind of moral perspective, yeah, I could say that. Or I'm not sure in what manner you're asking the question. Or if you're just saying openly, is it possible for anyone? Sure.
Okay, well, then that just means that the two can be divorced, and I can come up with examples that are more realistic for you.
What two can be divorced?
The ultimate, what you would consider ultimately the right choice, and the morally right choice.
All right. Well, let me ask you this: in terms of the overall picture, going back to a religious standpoint, if it came down to it, and you were handed the hammer and nails to basically, do the deed that the Romans did to Jesus, even though the outcome of doing this, the outcome of killing this person, is going to be a eternity in paradise, would you be implicated in it? Would you drive in the nails yourself in order to achieve that ultimate bliss, knowing full well that hey, this is going to royally suck. I'm going to kill a guy today, but you also factor in eternity and paradise in order to complete God's perfect plan, whatever. Would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty positive I'd do it. The issue is going to be whether I thought that, hey, did I do something morally wrong? And I would say, yeah, I've done something morally wrong.
So like I said, in that situation, doesn't God place you in a position where you're screwed either way?
Hold on one second. Someone just messaged me. I gotta. Sorry, ask that again.
I'm saying, in that situation, a situation that is, with God's plan, the way it actually played out, wouldn't you say that the people, put yourself in the Roman shoes? Wouldn't you say that the Romans who actually did this were screwed either way in terms of doing something wrong? No matter what they did something wrong. Either they didn't match with God's perfect plan, or they did go with God's perfect plan, which has a problem for free will, but they did go with it, and in turn they were guilty of an unforgivable sin. You just killed God's son, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't have done anything morally wrong by refraining from murdering Jesus. The circumstances might not have been great if they of course, obviously, I'm going to say that.
Wait, did Jesus have to die?
I don't know.
Did vicarious redemption have to be the only way of redemption in itself?
I don't know.
I mean, because you see it the term for this is called scapegoating, just like Christopher Hitchens said. You pile the sins onto one goat, drive that goat into the desert to starve, and then you thought you just getting rid of all the sin. In a sense, Jesus is not the shepherd, but is the sheep. And so we're piling all of our sins on him, torturing him for it, and then, torturing, i.e. beating the living crap out of him, whips, whatever, and then nailing him to a cross so he can die in agony. If that was God's perfect plan to begin with, would that really be a moral God? Would that God be worthy of worship?
Ooh, a big subject shift there, but okay.
Yeah, I figure pile driver, since it is the last 30 minutes of the show.
Right. I mean, I think that Jesus is God. Remember, and I think that Jesus is the one we sin against when we sin. So this is kind of what I was when I said before. I think God / Jesus is in a unique position to take a hit. I don't think that God can just forget the sin. The sin, in God physics or whatever, has to be paid for. In order for God to be just.
So Jesus and God are the same people?
They're both God. I'm a Trinitarian.
Hang on, Strife. Because if I remember correctly, didn't Jesus say while he was being nailed to the cross, "Father, why have you forsaken me?"
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't that mean that they're not the same person? Other than that, he would say, "Why have I forsaken myself?" Because the way the Bible puts it out is that Jesus was not committing suicide here. He was doing something to prove something to somebody else, i.e. he was proving, the reasons to open the gates to heaven for his Father. So wouldn't you say that, they were not necessarily the same person, and the idea of this is God's perfect plan would be immoral in itself?
No, Trinitarians do not believe that the Father and the Son are the same person. They believe that there's one God, but they believe that Jesus and the Father are separate persons.
Isn't that then a polytheistic thing?
No, because there's just one God.
But then what is Jesus?
Jesus is a person.
So Jesus
is
not
Jesus
God.
not God?
It's one God.
Yeah. And real quick, Jesus, I don't know where you got the idea that Jesus has died to prove something. That's not in the New Testament or anything, to my awareness.
No. Jesus died to open up the gates to heaven, correct?
Oh yeah, right. Yes.
Okay, so and Jesus dying, taking on the human form to feel, human emotions, to go through human experiences. That was the reason for Jesus coming in. And the way I see it, Jesus taking that form is to show that, hey, even though I have all these human emotions and all these, human-like desires, I can refrain from that. I can do this. I can show you that I am worthy of being saved. And in this case, him being in this unique position, him showing that he was worthy was not to be saved, but to actually open up the gates of heaven for everybody else.
No, no, because I don't have that view about why Jesus came. I don't think a reason for Jesus coming was at all for him to experience humanity. But I think I know where you're getting that from, because I have heard of a theory of atonement where something like that is involved, but that's not like a standard.
Well, what I was going with that, Jesus being able to feel human pain and emotion and whatnot. Well, let me ask you this first of all: do you deny that Jesus did not feel pain when he was being whipped and nailed to the cross?
Oh yeah, where he felt pain. Right.
Okay, he felt pain. All right, that's good. So, well, not good. Okay, but that just goes on with my point. Don't get that confused. All right, so when Jesus is getting whipped in this form, he is throwing himself under the bus in a sense, or something like that. And in doing so, he's trying to open up the gates to heaven in that way, which is with God's perfect plan. So it's God's perfect plan to have somebody, i.e. his own son, beaten the living crap out of and tortured in a way, die on the cross to pay for everyone else's sins, which abolishes the idea of personal responsibility in a sense. Would you consider that moral, or do you disagree with that entire premise altogether?
Yeah, there's a ton to unpackage in there. I mean,
yeah, I know there's a ton to package, so I'll say, then fine, let me narrow it down to this. The idea of Jesus nailing himself to the cross pretty much eliminates personal responsibility, or eliminates the thought of personal responsibility, because why be responsible when you can just pile it onto a goat and drive it out into the desert to starve to death? Would you say that is moral?
No, I'm responsible for doing something just in case it's wrong for me to not do it, and it's still wrong for me to sin. It's still wrong for me to steal. So I definitely have responsibilities.
All right. So if the responsibility,
wait.
hang on, Strive. If the responsibility therefore is yours, why does Jesus need to come down to save us all? Can we all just meet the big man upstairs and say, "Hey, listen, I royally screwed up on this occasion, on that occasion"? If you're going to be watching pretty much a movie of your entire life, and you have to admit for some of the evil things you've done, if you ever done evil things, couldn't you just say, "Oh, you don't just play the Jesus card. You say, yes, I am responsible for it. I apologize for it, and I'll do whatever I can to set the scale right." Do you have that option of not being in the vicarious redemption circle?
Yeah, I think you definitely have the option to not be in that. You can reject the gift. And to answer your other question, no, I mean, look, if I go into your house, I have a responsibility to respect your property. If I have a responsibility not to break your vase. But if I break your vase, you can have grace on me, and you can pay for that. You can get your vase without making me do so. But I still had responsibility. My responsibility never went away. I had responsibility from the get-go.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah, you have responsibility, but the fact is that if you were to show grace, in a sense, it wasn't grace in the way Jesus was doing things, because the fact is he was taking the punishment for you. So essentially, he was in his own hell because of the sins of not only the people that were living at the time, but the people who haven't even been born yet. He took the sin of all of humanity. And as far as I know, after he died, didn't he descend into hell after that?
I don't think so. No.
Isn't that when he opened the gates of? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's based on a reading of a particular verse.
I haven't been to church since I was 16 years
old.
So
wait, where was Jesus during the 3 days he was dead, supposedly?
I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because we have a chant that we do in church, and I still remember it vividly. We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And you go through the chant, and in the end it says, you know, he suffered, died, and was buried, and then descended into hell. On the third day he rose again in fulfillment of the prophecies. He then ascended, and he ascended into hell, and then after the 3-day prophecies were met, he then ascended into heaven. So in a sense, he was beaten, tortured, crucified, sent to hell, and at that point, who knows what happened to him down there? I can only imagine it wouldn't be good. And then coming back and saying, okay, it is done, wouldn't that be like, oh, he just took a massive bullet for you when that bullet was meant for you?
Yeah, it would be like taking a bullet. Yeah.
So
I
but
mean,
it's the
in the
bullet of
example,
responsibility.
hold on. In the example, I mean, the individual. I mean, you would be paying for the vase.
Yeah, you would be paying for the vase, but in a sense, it's like the guy doesn't have any choice in the matter. It's like,
You can look here. No, that's not true. I think you can reject. I don't think that everybody. If I thought that Jesus paid for everybody's sins, literally, if they were all paid for, and by the way, this is a theory of atonement that I hold to. It's a regular one, but there are different ones where you actually do say that all the sins are paid for. But I think that if all the sins were paid for, then we'd all be going to heaven.
Wait, what? Wait, isn't this punishment for sin death, though?
hang on, Strife, hang on. I'll let you go. I'm just going to finish up right here. What I was actually going at is based on what other people were telling me. And when you're saying you disagree with that, I kind of want to jump on it, unpack it, and see where it leads. So, are you saying that if we reject the gift, if we reject Jesus, if we just do things like we do things, that we can still go to heaven even if we reject Satan? Do you disagree with the people that say if we reject Jesus, we go to hell automatically? Doesn't
No, I
matter
don't
what we do on earth.
No, I don't reject that.
You don't reject that. So even if we're a good person, and even if we, do whatever you would do, but without the Jesus stuff added in, if we completely reject Jesus as a whole, then we are therefore doomed to hell.
Right.
All right, then that's what I want to make sure. Don't you find that immoral in a sense?
No, I mean, you'd be punished for your crimes justly.
But what would be the crime? Besides not being convinced by what was thrown at me. It's not my fault.
Here, I'll tell you, you've lied before, right?
Yes, I lied.
You've been through this before, right?
Oh, no.
Hang on, Strife. Hang on, because there's actually a way around this. Don't worry.
Well, no, I'm just going to say, look, if you've lied, you've sinned. If you've had inappropriate thoughts, you've sinned.
Yes.
There's a whole list of sins that you performed. So,
yes,
that's all I'm going to say.
Yes, there is a bunch of sins that they perform, but rather than pushing off the fact that I did them off on somebody else, I take full responsibility for them, and I don't try to make an appeasement towards God. I make appeasement towards the people who I've hurt. And I make appeasement towards the people I hurt by either paying for what I've broken, apologizing to them in person, or doing whatever I can to somehow pay back. I'm sorry that, my foot slipped up the clutch. I did a huge burnout in your lawn. How about I plant new grass and I cut your grass for a month? How's that? And if they agree to it, then in reality, no harm, no foul, right?
First off, you're not going to be able to pay back everyone you've ever sinned against. Secondly, on Christianity, when you sin, you're not just sinning against a person. You're actually sinning against God as well. And thirdly, the point is, the whole question right now is why you'd be going to hell. It's not because you didn't believe. You'd be going to hell because of your sin.
Isn't that a sin, though, to not believe?
Yeah, that's what was the whole thing. If we do, well, that's the thing. If we do the exact same thing you do, let's say we lived completely mirrored lives. You go to school, I go to school. You help a person, I help a person. In the same time, the same moment, everything. What we do, we're practically clones in a parallel universe.
But you didn't accept the gift.
But you didn't accept the gift and won. Would you then be going to hell? And on the other side of the spectrum, if you did accept the gift, you would then be going to heaven. So in one case you go to hell, one case you go to heaven on nothing more than just accepting Jesus. And if you're not convinced by it, well, tough luck.
Yeah, but look, the difference is, I mean, absolutely, there's only one difference between those two people, but that doesn't change the fact that the reason you're in hell, the reason you go to hell is because of your sin.
Okay, so if we lived
Well,
completely
you
mirror
could say
lives, then wouldn't you be going your hell yourself, even if you accepted the gift?
No, why? No, why? No, because of the gift.
Well, no, it's not like that. So you're saying,
no, no.
in order for you to get into heaven, you have to accept Jesus. You have to. There's no other way around it.
Right. I mean, there's the point I made earlier about you don't have to know Jesus' name or anything. But yes, it has. I mean, it's going to be through Jesus if you go to heaven, because everyone's sinned.
All right. So for the people that have never heard of your religion before, would they be screwed in a sense?
That's kind of what I was actually just mentioning. No, I mean, it depends on what they believe exactly. I don't think they have to know the name of Jesus.
Yeah, but there's a world of difference. I mean, yeah, they won't know his name, but they also won't even know of him at all. They won't know of atonement. They won't know of any of the doctrine. It's far more than just not knowing his name.
Right.
You do still have to atone for it. You do
Right,
still
that was
have to
just
repent, right?
when I was saying they don't have to know his name. I was kind of referring to that earlier point in the conversation where I actually really elaborated on that, and I can elaborate on it again. The idea is that I think that a person needs to believe that they're a sinner. I think they have to believe that. I think they have to believe, obviously they have to believe God exists. I think they have to believe, that God is good, and I think someone can, in virtue of that, looking at their sin, they can feel guilty, and they can ask God for forgiveness, and they can, in virtue of believing God's
But then
goodness, believe that God's provided a means to pay for that sin. I think that's something that someone could do, and they don't have to know the name of Jesus. But what happens is when they believe that God will provide a means, I think that they don't, that means is Jesus, whether they know it by that name or not.
I don't
But
think anyone.
how can they access that means if they're completely ignorant of that means?
Yeah, the road
I mean, they
essentially is
can
cut
say
off.
sorry and stuff, but none of that has to do with Jesus. So, are you saying that all you have to do is say you're sorry to God?
No,
You don't have to know anything about Jesus.
no,
You never have
that's
to.
just one of the things. The other thing that I think, I mean, this is speculative, but it's
Yeah.
kind of where I am right now. I speculate that what's relevant, what you need to believe is that God will provide a means to pay for your sin, to take care of your sin.
So
Because
That's it.
the whole
That's
idea
it.
is the person knows, oh my, I'm guilty, I'm here guilty before God, I deserve punishment. The person can believe God is just, and God, you can't just completely ignore sin, but God can find a way to take care of sin, and that
So
whole
that's all that's
mindset.
required. You don't need to. You don't have to accept Jesus in your heart. You don't have to pray to Him. You don't have to
Right,
get
right,
baptized. You don't have to do any of that.
right.
All you
I
have to
mean,
do is feel sorry and ask for forgiveness in prayer to God.
yeah, for people who, I mean, I think if you've heard about Jesus and you've rejected Jesus, then you're accountable in that sense. But yeah, for the man on the island who's never encountered anything like that, I don't think the requirements are nearly so stringent. I think it's rather loose.
well, let me
Well,
how about this? Let
what,
me flip it around real quick. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, and don't think I'm trying to throw you into a blasphemous situation here, but let's say you are God. Would you have done the grand design, the grand scheme of things, the grand plan the same way he would?
You mean like what?
This is just for sake of argument. I just want to make that completely clear. Would you have done the same thing God did? As far as the way things have planned out. Oh, if I was God, I would have done this. I would have done this differently or that differently. Is there anything of God's design that you would change right now?
Um,
Well, I'll just say it like this: is there anything that you disagree with when it comes to God's morality, moral integrity in certain aspects?
no, that I can say no to.
wait, can I ask something? Doesn't the whole idea of this gift somewhat reduce to a kind of bribe?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was talking about. If
I mean,
I'm
the
not.
the scenario you were talking about, Redline, the difference between, I mean, you kept saying that the sin is what ultimately sends people to hell, but the determining factor is whether or not you decide to take I mean, you might not like me calling it a bribe, but I don't see that as inaccurate, really.
I mean,
Is the bribe
what-
that, hey, I'm bribing you to ask for forgiveness, or what's the bribe?
well, the bribe is, I guess, whether or not you're in good with the boss's son, so to speak, and then therefore you're allowed to come into heaven,
Yeah,
regardless of the fact that you have two equally sinful people or sinless people. Either way, the only thing that makes the difference between these two people is one has said, "I'm friends with Jesus."
Yeah, it's
So just
like that.
fill this in. I'll give you blank
The other-
if you give me blank. What are those? What goes in those blanks? Because I'm not
Okay.
quite.
You
I
give
want to know
me
precisely what
salvation,
the bribe is.
and I'll give you my life.
Sorry, say that again.
You give me salvation, and I'll give you my repentance.
Oh, so I'm the one
But-
making the bribe to God?
Well,
Or you can flip it the other way around. God is saying this. All right, let's say I'm speaking from God's throne right here. God says, if you worship me, I will give you this eternal peace in heaven so that you can continue worshiping me. And if you
So-
don't worship me, regardless what you did in your life, you will get eternal torture.
Yes.
yeah, you
okay,
could say God is saying, "I'll give you life. I won't torture you if you give me your obedience and your repentance."
Yeah, but I don't think that that's what God's asking for. I think because remember, on my view, when someone is regenerated, they spontaneously want to do these types of things. They spontaneously want to worship God and do those types
When
of
you
things.
say
It's not like
regenerated,
Wait, they spontaneously don't have choice in the matter if they want to or
wait. What do you mean by regenerated? Do you mean when someone becomes born again, or when they?
Yeah, when someone accepts Christ into their heart, I think that there is a change, whether slow or fast. You know, they are a new person. They have their nat. You know, I kind of alluded to it before as like, you know, having an extra voice in your head, kind of having another inclination, and I think, you know, that grows. And I think a person who become saved, it's not like they're forcing themselves to worship God. They want to. They just do it. I want to do it. I don't think any Christian worships God to, you know, oh, I've got to do this because of,
So
you know,
are you-
because it's part of it.
It's-
Hold on.
Okay.
Nobody's saying I'm worshiping because it's part of the deal. You know, if I want salvation, I have to do this. People are worshiping God because they want to.
So the motivation for you is not at all. You're not at all motivated by the desire to avoid hell.
Right. Yeah, and
Really?
I'm serious about that. Like I'm genuinely in love with God. Like I don't know how else to describe it.
How do you love something exactly that you? Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I see it as being a simultaneous. You're simultaneously told to love them and simultaneously told to fear them. You know, we fear them because of this, but at the same time we have to love them because of that. You know, we love him for the gift he's given us, but, you know, don't you disagree in some sense with the way God is doing things?
I mean, not yet. I don't see a reason yet to think that.
Well, the reasons we've listed, you know, in a way that it eliminates personal responsibility in a sense. It sounds to me like a big brother bribe. You're in it with the boss's son, and so you get a in some senses a get out of jail free card if you do that. And no matter what you do in your life to be a good person, you pay your debts to society, you help out other people, you are completely nice. Again, living a mirrored image to the best Christian, Catholic, Buddhist, whatever religion that you happen to be in. If you're not in on that religion, even though the guy did the same actions you did, you would then be royally screwed in a sense.
Well, take the extreme case. You know, say Hitler, for example. I don't know. I mean, just anybody extremely evil you
Almost
can think of,
went
right?
a whole
And
show
let's
without
say,
Hitler.
so let's say Hitler on his deathbed repented, genuinely repented, and said, "I'm so sorry for all this," you know, and met all the criteria that you have to meet to get into heaven. And by the same token, somebody else who led a relatively pretty, I mean, as virtuous as you can live, granted that we're all sinless heathens, whatever, right? That person didn't believe, he wasn't convinced of Jesus, blah, blah, blah.
he gets sent to hell. Does that at all irk you?
No, and here's why. Here's what I think you have to really come to grips with, is the fact that people who go to hell are genuinely getting what they deserve.
Eternal torture?
It's justice. It is their, the only difference is they've rejected grace, or they've not accepted grace. That what you're thinking is you're trying to grade on a curve, but I'm telling you, no, you're getting the grade that you deserve.
Really? Wait. They both. You're saying they both deserve exactly what they got.
Which are
Hitler deserved heaven, and the Buddhist monk deserved to burn forever.
I'm talking about the sinners. Sinners, insofar as they reject the gift, are getting exactly what they deserve. Hitler, if he genuinely repented, then he wouldn't be getting what he deserved.
You just said, so then God's system is wrong. You just said everyone. You said you believe everyone gets. You genuinely believe everyone gets what they deserve. But then there is a way by which even Hitler could go to heaven, and a Buddhist monk could go to hell.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, if I didn't mean to imply, even the non-believers. Contextually, I meant to be referring to the people who reject grace. So the idea is, and how much time do we have, by the way?
We have like 6 minutes, so take your time.
Okay, so let me kind of lay this out, because the idea is, there's some kind of injustice going on here with what God is doing, right? I mean, he's letting some people, off. Isn't that unjust? And then he's being just at other times. Something's wrong with this, right? That's kind of the feeling.
Well, yeah, it's getting to the point where it's coming down to the actions they actually did in their life and what they actually are doing on their deathbed. So what Hitler did in killing 6 million people, and what the nice guy did, but not just believing in Jesus, but what opened the door for people, was just nice. And Hitler gets, being general, does that, and he gets into heaven.
All right.
Yeah. Here, let me tell you kind of my view here. Because on my view, God is supposed to be the greatest possible being, and I think that it is impossible to do the maximally just thing and the maximally loving thing at the same time. Often those conflict. Would y'all agree with me on that?
I haven't.
Depends, but let's just say yes.
Yeah. I mean, so yes. I mean, the maximally loving thing. Let's say your son, you're a mother and your son deserves the death penalty. The maximally loving thing would be to hide your son, but that wouldn't be the just thing. So, you can't do both at the same time. And I think God can be in those situations. And God isn't the greatest impossible being. God is the greatest possible being. And I think in these situations where God has the alternative of, between choosing to do the loving thing or the just thing, that God can, both of them are good choices to make, and God in his freedom can choose one or the other. And the way God set things up, I think, is great. I mean, God treats the people who reject his grace justly, and people who accept his grace he treats lovingly, and he doesn't do wrong either way. He does a good thing in both cases.
All right, then.
Yeah, but you personally, that doesn't irk you at all to think that Hitler could have gotten into heaven, and one of the Jews that he tortured went to hell.
No, because I think what's going down, Wittgensteinian, is that you seem to think that you're just so vastly different than Hitler, whereas in my view, you're sick too, man. I mean, you don't know how bad you are. You've heard the Christian line before.
That's such a pitiful view on life, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really is.
No, I hear what you're saying.
It does.
But it's not.
I mean, you're filth.
You're talking about our natures, though. In terms of that, I could maybe agree with you. But there is a huge difference in terms of our actions.
Yeah. No, I'm saying even in terms of actions. I mean, you're thinking relatively speaking. Well, relative to Hitler, I'm so much better. But what I'm saying is that, look, God doesn't grade on the curve. You are freaking messed up, man. That's the Christian view.
Wait, I still don't understand.
I don't even have to say relative to Hitler. Even if you want to go with some absolute standard, I've only perhaps went so far down the notches away from this absolute standard than Hitler has. So I'm only like a -3 or something relative to the standard.
You know, I mean, I think you're like a negative, ridiculously. You know, I think you're a
Well,
lot worse
okay,
off.
yeah, I'm probably a more whatever.
Wait, I
but,
thought Christians were not supposed to judge.
Well, all right. Well, how about this? Since we only have 2 minutes left, I want to just go on final thoughts before I stop the broadcast. So, going down the line, if any of you want to go first on just final thoughts, this is the point where we just don't do final. We don't converse, just final statements. Whit, go.
All right, and maybe we can talk about this more after the broadcast. But I wanted to get. I'll just say this. We didn't get a chance to get back to the whole nature versus commands thing, and I did want to say though how I think that whole line of reasoning ultimately, I mean, it's very strange to me because ultimately what I see happening is that you're reducing morality to nature, and ultimately you stop appealing to what makes God. The defining characteristic of God, in my mind, is, according to the apologists even, is the persona of God, the will. And absent that, once you just start talking about his essential nature, you're just appealing to an aspect, a characteristic of nature. And therefore it's that same characteristic could, I mean, hypothetically could still exist absent the character of God, the persona, the will of a divine being. And furthermore, so in which case you in a sense you actually become a naturalist in order to argue against what is seen as, I guess, the naturalist view of morality. But even more than that, I think the whole notion of God's nature is itself a huge point of confusion, or rather, the way it's phrased is completely misleading, because what does it really mean to talk about the nature of something if not a thing's actions? I mean, the way it's forced to start talking about it is that this nature is this kind of like object out there, this kind of physical thing or something. If it's not just the kind of description of a being's actions, which would be his commands, and then therefore you get back into really appealing to his commands once again. If you're not doing that, then you're just talking about some object that exists there completely independent of any will, any kind of choice, and you might as well just be appealing to some characteristic of the universe.
All right,
So that's my
Strife,
piece.
got anything to say? The one moment you have to talk, you don't say anything. Seriously. Okay, if Strife's not gonna go, if you want to go, be my guest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to try to respond to all that right now, and I'm not allowed anyways. But after we can talk about it afterwards. I mean, I guess the whole discussion here was about whether, religion. How should we evaluate that? Is your religion, evil or whatever? And and kind of like I was saying at the beginning, I mean, a religion is a set of beliefs, and I wanted to say that, I mean, if Christianity is true, if that set of beliefs is true, then it's good. It's good in that way, and so that's all. And I appreciate being on.
No problem. Any time. And just want to say that we lost Stripe, but oh well, he said enough, I guess. But when we invite people on, we want to promote the conversation. Even though we disagree with each other, I just want to thank you for coming on. I think this is a good way that we can continue on the conversation. And if you enjoyed it, please tell other people who might want to chime in. Tell them to come to the show. Like I said, it's every Sunday, and we'll be more than happy to have them on. My final thoughts on the whole thing would be this: is that we have an absolute power which plays favorites. Plays favorites in the sense that it's whoever can hold the biggest God sign. Look at me, I praise God more. Up, that guy's worshiping me, he automatically gets in. I see this as a get out of jail free card. I see this as eliminating personal responsibility in that sense. I can see where someone thinking that Hitler would get any sort of paradise whatsoever simply for him saying, "Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm sincerely sorry. I believe in you now." And the other guy who has done everything a moral person could possibly do in the name of morality to begin with would get eternal torture with, with no appeal whatsoever. To me, I see this as ultimately immoral. And in my opinion, since God has made this world so unconvincing of his existence, I really don't see how I can be held responsible for believing in what I believe. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have the ability. If he can create the entire universe in a day, he can show up on Fox News and say, "By the way, here I am. Everyone gets a free Escalade," or something like that. I don't see how that is such a big problem. I don't see why he has to go through an old text where we have translations of translations and copies of copies of copies with no originals whatsoever and expect us to believe it 100% and deem us worthy on that 100%. But that's just my opinion, and I'm sure some people disagree with it, but again, that's just my opinion. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and like I said, we're on every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Blog TV. The link to our channel will be in the description, and with that, thanks for watching. Peace out, girls.